Yeah.
Can you share your name, your organization, and a little bit about what you do, the work you do?
Sure. I'm Anthony Cook, a law professor at Georgetown Law Center. I am the director of and founder of CREED, the Coalition for Racial Equity and Democratic Economy. And I also founded and am the CEO of Gatebridge Community, which is a community nonprofit that helps to partner with communities to ideate, incubate, and accelerate into launch and scale community wealth building initiatives. That was a mouthful, wasn't it?
Can you tell a little bit more some of those initiatives that you're working on?
Yeah, sure. So our first inaugural initiative is around food security. It's called Rosie's Grocery. And so Rosie's Grocery is a multi-stakeholder cooperative that we work with communities to stand up. And by multi-stakeholder cooperative, I mean that it will be owned and governed by the workers who work there, the consumers who shop there, and the ecosystem stewards that have helped to invest in it, provide technical experience or expertise, and to stand the initiative up. And those two ecosystem stewards are Gatebridge Community and our operating partner, National Co-op Grocers, right? So we intend to launch the grocery stores in what's called LILAs, used to be referred to as food deserts. They are low income, low access to fresh food areas. And we're focused for our first two initiatives in Washington, D.C., east of the river in Wards 7 and 8 that are disproportionately Black, disproportionately low income, and disproportionately food deserts or LILAs that don't have access to fresh food. And we've made great traction so far. We've got a spot identified and we're negotiating the LOI on that spot. And we hope to start building it out in the next year and be open by the third quarter of 2027. Yeah.
And why was it important to you to be here today?
Yeah. Well, you know, look, a lot of my work is focused on next systems thinking, right? Focused on trying to find alternatives to the more extractive and harmful forms of capitalism that have ravaged so many of the communities that I serve. And so, you know, this conference, this summit, is just a beautiful way of coming in contact with people who are like-minded and who are, you know, engaged in similar work in their communities. You know, I find that, you know, gatherings like this and this kind of work in solidarity economics, community wealth building, cooperative economics, however you want to put it, right, deals, you know, in three different aspects of community building. It deals with the physical needs that people have to have meaningful, dignifying work and employment, to put food on the table in the case of our initiative, Rosie's, or to have meaningful jobs producing goods and services that the community can use. So there is that physical kind of material element associated with the work, but it's also extraordinarily, you know, intellectual and mental, you know, because it requires that people kind of think through the systems that have done us harm and think through how we can change those systems to create alternative systems that will do us good, that will value us as human beings, as workers, as consumers, as residents of local communities, and where we can grow in partnership with others to create a better world than we already have. And finally, you know, I think this work is extraordinarily spiritual. I mean, we've heard in conversations about how vital it is to reckon with trauma and to reckon with pain, and to be in a community where that you can trust that, you know, your vulnerability will not be abused, exploited, taken advantage of, is a wonderful kind of affirming space to be in, right? So this work, I think, is incredibly validating and spiritual. It is interconnective. It's about being able to meet people where they are and to create that kind of rare space in which, you know, spirit speaks to spirit. You know, it's not professors speaking to student, it's not college educated speaking to non-college educated, it's none of the hierarchies associated with all the stuff that fragment and divide us. It is shared humanity. And that's a beautiful and spiritual place to be in, I think.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, is it good?
That was great.
Okay.
Oh, wait,
You can grab
I'm
your
not
stuff
done
if you
yet.
like.
He's talking to her.
Oh,
You
okay.
did wonderfully.
We're at 5 o'clock, are you?
Okay, I'm good, yeah.
What's your personal motivation for doing this? Or something from your life that, drives you?
Yeah, well, look, the name of this, the grocery, Rosie's, right, is really kind of, I think, participating in, leaning into the spirit and the tradition of very strong, courageous women, right, that think have been at the forefront of fomenting and constructing meaningful, humanizing forms of community. When I think of Rosa Parks, who is referred to as Rosie, right, she epitomizes that. She was involved in the struggle for justice and humanity long before the Montgomery bus boycott, right? And her resilience and her determination to stand up to the evils of Jim Crow is something that has always really impressed me and inspired me, right? When I got to college, I read about Rosie the Riveter, and there were many different Rosies, and they were of all races and ethnicities, but women who left the household, left home, and came into the factory and worked while husbands were away at war, really courageous, and it opened the door for the modern, I think, feminist movement in so many ways, right? So I've always loved those stories, and in the past decade, I've started to read a lot of stories about the Rosies of color, because the original Rosies were always projected as being, white women. But actually, it was a very diverse collection of women who did the same thing. So Rosie the Riveter inspired the situation and inspired the business, but also my mom's name was Rosie. And in Magnolia, Mississippi, she was at the very core, I think, of community generating, life validating solidarity work, right? Didn't call it that at the time, but that's what it was. Our house was situated at the intersection of roads, and it became like the gathering spot, as it were, for people in the community. And I remember my mom leading women in the church and the community with regard to canning and putting up vegetables and getting ready for the winter and sewing, and really the glue of community, right? And it was a community that shared resources, right? No one ever went without, and whenever there was a problem, a challenge, or a crisis, people were there to support each other, right? This was true in men's culture too when I was growing up in Magnolia, Mississippi, but it was particularly true in women's culture. So, I named the initiative Rosie's Grocery because I wanted to tap into that rich history, I think, of healing and solidarity, mutualism, cooperation, being there for one another in a very, meaningful way, right? So I think that's what's motivated me, right? To want to capture a little bit of that past and to bring it to communities where I know that ethic still lives and where that love and mutuality still lives, but to provide a platform on which it can not only live here and there, but flourish collectively to really pervade the community and create more opportunity for people who live in communities that are challenged right now. Yeah. Yeah, well, look, we are living in a period of great duress. There is a lot of fear, and understandably so, in this moment where so much of the safety net that we've grown accustomed to is being, torn and discarded, and people feel vulnerable, right? Where, democracy itself is in question and on the line, right? And where, protesting this, devolution of democracy, this destruction of democracy, is threatened to be punished with great impunity, right? And so there's a lot on the line here, and I think people kind of rightly feel that, they've got to put a lot at risk in order to perhaps step into the breach and to save this democracy, right? there is that. There's also, the reality that life for a lot of people were not that good before the present crisis, right? And so when these communities hear phraseology like the rule of law, right, and the return of normalcy, it bothers these communities because they know that under the rule of law, mass incarceration took place with reckless impunity. They know that, people were swept to the margins, being displaced by gentrification under the pretense that a rising tide would lift all boats. And they were drowned, their families were drowned in the crisis of 2008, 2009, in, the various economic downturns that have happened since, and the reign of a cruel and crass neoliberalism that focuses on extracting as much wealth and resources out of communities and individuals as it possibly can, not just in the communities that I serve in Southeast DC, but in the region, in the country, and in the world, right? And even communities that have been previously kind of immune to that, ruthless form of capitalist extraction have felt it severely over the past 30 and 40 years as white working class families have been hit hard, as the opioids epidemic has, ravaged so much of middle working class America. This has happened. One would hope that it would create the opportunity for people to see into each other's worlds and to create a kind of collective solidarity that didn't exist before. But we see that, the capacity of racist, white supremacist, autocratic populists have a way of undermining that. And people can still, amazingly, identify with, race and class privileges of people who are not interested in helping their communities at all, over having some common bonds and linkages to people who are similarly situated economically, socially, and otherwise, right? So there's a lot of work to be done. There's no question, about it. But yeah, those are, I think, some of the things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there anything else, I want to make sure you get out when you need to, is there anything else you want to share, add, encourage people to do or think about?
Yeah, exactly. So I think that it is important that people on the kind of like physical level of battling depression and a sense of being alone in this moment, that they do everything that they can, utilize, digital media resources to find communities, if you're not already a part of it, where you can, be in solidarity with folk, where you can not feel alone. Because that's what, moments like this try to do. They try to fragment, divide, and conquer, and to alienate us from the possibilities of being in solidarity with other people. So it's absolutely essential that you find communities to be a part of. And hopefully, those communities are communities of resistance, which means that, they are open to learning how we got into the mess that we're in now and what historic conditions had to be created to give rise to all of the hardships that we are presently experiencing, right? And hopefully those questions can lead to solutions that are different from what existed before. They are alternative systems. They are next systems, right? They are envisioning the possibilities of worlds that we have not yet really considered and embraced as an American people. I think that those three things in connection with each other, finding good communities, being able to critique and to envision alternative, forms of resistance, and then collectively engaging in that resistance and that rebuild for a world that does not yet exist, are the things that I would urge people to try to do in this moment, right?